I need access to the registry for controlled substances right now.
I understand, officer, but I can only release that information with a warrant.
I legally can't show real pictures, but here is a story about a very smart pharmacist named Dr. Michelle Carter. She was working behind the medicine counter at Riverside Pharmacy. It was a Saturday afternoon in March, around 2 o'clock. Michelle was 39 years old. She had been a pharmacist for 15 years. She had a special doctor degree in pharmacy from the University of Michigan, but almost no one knew this big secret about her, not even the police officer who was about to walk in and ask her for something important. Michelle also had a law degree from Harvard Law School. She studied law while still working full-time as a pharmacist because she loved learning about health rules, keeping patients' private information safe, and people's rights written in the Constitution. She never worked as a full-time lawyer, but she knew the law as well as any real lawyer. Michelle was helping an old customer get their medicine when she noticed a police officer standing near the door watching the store. She finished with the customer, said goodbye, and then the officer walked up to the counter. His badge said Officer D. Matthews from the local police department. He looked about 30 years old, normal size, and acted like everyone always listened to him right away. He put a piece of paper on the counter. It looked official, but it was just a simple request on police paper, not a real court warrant or special court paper called a subpoena. He said he was doing an investigation and needed the prescription records for one specific patient. Michelle looked at the paper carefully, then she asked politely if he had a warrant or a subpoena for those records. Matthews said no, he didn't need one. He said just being a police officer was enough to get them. Michelle stayed calm and explained that prescription records are private health information protected by a big law called HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. She said she could not give them out without the patient's permission or proper court order. Matthews got upset. He said he was working on a crime case and had the right to ask for records that mattered to the case. He said if she didn't help, she was blocking justice. Michelle stayed very calm, but inside she felt nervous because she was standing up to someone with power who didn't seem to understand or care about the real rules. She told him she understood he was investigating something, but she could not break patient privacy rules just because he asked. HIPAA has a few special times when police can get records, but those times need the right papers. He needed a subpoena or warrant, or he had to show there was a real emergency right now, like danger to people's lives or safety. Matthews said he wasn't going to get more paperwork because the case was very urgent. The patient was suspected of doing bad things with drugs, and waiting even a little could let the bad person destroy proof or keep breaking the law. Michelle asked what the patient's name was. Matthews said that was secret information and he wouldn't tell her unless she gave him the records first. Michelle pointed out that didn't make sense. She couldn't give records for someone if she didn't know who it was. Then Matthews wrote a name on a piece of paper and slid it across the counter. Michelle knew the name right away because she had personally given medicine to that patient just 3 days earlier. It was real pain medicine from a good doctor for a real health problem. Nothing looked strange or wrong at all. She told Matthews she had checked that patient's medicines carefully and everything looked correct and legal. Matthews said he didn't want her medical opinion. He was ordering her to give the records because it was an official investigation. His voice got louder and angrier. He said if she didn't hand them over right now, he would arrest her for blocking him, and then he would get a search warrant that would mess up her whole pharmacy and make her look bad in front of all the customers. Michelle felt like giving in, not because he was right, but because it is scary when a police officer with power threatens you. But then she remembered exactly why she went to law school while working full-time. It was for moments exactly like this, when someone with government power tries to make you do something illegal and uses fear instead of following the correct rules. She told him calmly that she was not blocking his investigation. She was doing her legal duty under federal privacy law. Breaking HIPAA could mean very big fines for her personally and for the pharmacy, and she could even lose her pharmacist's license. She said she would happily give him everything he needed as soon as he brought the proper subpoena or warrant, which any judge would sign quickly if he really had good reason to think a crime happened. Matthews said he didn't have time for bureaucratic hoops, and this was urgent police business. Then Michelle did something that surprised him a lot. She said since he kept saying he had the legal power to demand records without any papers, she needed him to tell her the exact law or court case that gave him that power. Matthews looked confused. He said he didn't have to tell her any law. He was a police officer and had natural power to ask for evidence during investigations. Michelle politely but strongly said that no, police do not have natural power to take federally protected private medical information. If he thought they did, please tell her the exact legal reason, because she had studied HIPAA a lot and didn't know about any such rule. Matthews tried a different way. He said he was asking under state laws about controlled drugs and that pharmacists have to report suspicious drug activity to police. Michelle nodded and said he was partly right. Pharmacists do have to report strange things under state drug monitoring programs, but that is different from a police officer demanding full records without a warrant. And she had already looked at this patient's prescriptions carefully and didn't see anything suspicious, so there was no reporting duty. Matthews said she wasn't qualified to decide what was suspicious. That's why he was investigating. Michelle explained that she was actually very qualified. It is a big part of her job as a pharmacist to check every prescription for real use, dangerous mixes, and signs of misuse or selling drugs illegally. She had a doctorate in pharmacy and extra training on spotting fake or bad prescriptions. If she decided after her professional check that everything was okay, then no report was needed. Matthews said she was being difficult on purpose, and maybe she had something to hide if she was protecting this patient's records so hard. He asked if she knew the patient personally or had some special reason to protect them. Michelle felt angry because now he was accusing her of doing something wrong. She said firmly that she did not know the patient at all. She was protecting patient privacy exactly as federal law requires, and saying she was doing something bad was unfair and wrong. She had followed every rule perfectly, while he was trying to break federal privacy law without proper papers. Matthews said if she didn't give the records, he would get a warrant, and when he did, he would make sure investigators looked at every single prescription she had ever filled, searching for any tiny mistake. That sounded like a threat to punish her later. Michelle picked up her phone and started recording the whole conversation. Matthews immediately said she couldn't record him because it broke his privacy. Michelle, who had studied constitutional law in her law degree, told him she absolutely had the right to record a police officer doing official work in a public store. Many federal courts had said that was allowed. Matthews reached out like he was going to grab her phone. Michelle pulled it away and said if he tried to take her phone or stop her from recording, that would break her First Amendment rights to free speech and might even be assault if he touched her or her things without permission.
The situation was getting very tense, from just asking for records to almost a fight. Right then, an old lady customer walked in needing help finding medicine on the shelves. Michelle told Matthews she had to help the customer because it was her job to give good care. Matthews said he wasn't finished and she had to stay until he said so. Michelle said he could wait if he wanted, but she had to take care of her customers. She walked out from behind the counter to the store area, still holding her phone and recording so the video showed Matthews standing angrily at the counter. She helped the lady pick the right product and then came back to the counter. While she was gone, Matthews had called his boss on the phone. When Michelle returned, he had just finished the call and looked even more serious. He said his supervisor confirmed he had the power to demand records during a crime investigation, and she had to give them now or face trouble. Michelle asked if the supervisor would put that in writing and show the exact laws that beat HIPAA. Matthews said no, a spoken order was enough. Michelle said she needed proper papers in her files before she could share private health information. She couldn't do it just because someone said so. Then, Matthews started to walk behind the counter into the dispensing area. Michelle immediately said he was not allowed in there without permission. That was a locked, safe area with controlled medicines and private patient files. Going in without a warrant would be trespassing. Matthews said he didn't need permission, he was law enforcement. Michelle said being a police officer did not give him the right to walk into private business areas with medicines and secret records without a warrant. She stood right in the opening of the counter, blocking his way, with her phone still recording. Matthews said now she was physically blocking a police officer and that was a crime. Michelle said she was protecting private property and protected information from someone trying to enter without permission. That was her legal right and her job duty. If he tried to push past her, that would be assault and she would press charges. She reminded him again that she had offered many times to help fully as soon as he brought the right legal papers, and his refusal to get them showed he knew his demand was not legal. Matthews looked at her with anger and surprise. He clearly wasn't used to someone saying no to him so strongly, especially not a regular pharmacist. Another customer came in, a middle-aged man with a prescription to fill. Michelle excused herself from Matthews and started helping the man. Matthews followed along the counter, still demanding the records. The customer noticed the argument and asked if everything was okay. Michelle, professionally, said she was handling a law enforcement matter and would fill his prescription in a moment. Matthews told the customer that Michelle was blocking a police investigation. The customer looked confused and looked from Matthews to Michelle. Michelle calmly explained she was protecting patient privacy as the law required, and that the officer was demanding medical records without the proper warrant. The customer happened to be a retired law professor who taught at the local law school and knew a lot about health law. He understood the situation immediately. He told Matthews that the pharmacist was completely correct. HIPAA requires a warrant or subpoena for police to get medical records except in very specific emergency cases. Matthews said this was an urgent criminal investigation. The professor asked if there was an immediate threat to someone's life or safety that qualified for the HIPAA emergency exception. Matthews paused, then said the person was doing ongoing drug crimes. The professor said that did not count as an emergency under HIPAA, and that Matthews needed to use the proper legal steps. Matthews said he wasn't going to take advice from some random customer in a pharmacy. The professor introduced himself as Professor Emeritus of Law from the local law school, specializing in health law. Matthews's face showed he realized the situation was getting even worse for him.
Finally, Matthews left the pharmacy, but not before telling Michelle she hadn't heard the last of this. He would come back with a warrant and make sure every part of her work was checked carefully. Michelle said he was welcome to come back any time with the proper legal papers and that she kept perfect records that would pass any check. After he left, the law professor congratulated Michelle for standing up so well. He gave her his business card and said if she ever needed legal help or someone to explain HIPAA rules in court, he would be glad to assist. Michelle thanked him very much and filled his prescription for free as a thank you gift. Michelle spent the next hour writing down every single detail of what happened. She wrote about every demand Matthews made, every threat he said, his attempt to walk into the secure dispensing area without permission, and his try to stop her from recording. She saved the video from her phone in several safe places, including online cloud storage. Then she called the pharmacy owner, Mr. Robert Chen, who owned 3 small independent pharmacies. Chen listened carefully and became very concerned. He told her he fully supported her decision to protect patient privacy. She had done exactly the right thing and he would call their lawyer right away. The lawyer, Patricia Rodriguez, called Michelle within 1 hour. Patricia was an expert in health law and had helped pharmacies and doctors with rule problems for 20 years. She listened to Michelle explain everything and then watched the video. Patricia said Michelle handled the situation perfectly. She explained HIPAA correctly, offered to help as soon as proper papers came, and protected both the patient's privacy and the pharmacy's property very well. Patricia said she would write a serious letter to the police chief describing the whole incident, teaching the department about HIPAA rules and warning them that any more attempts to get patient records without correct permission would lead to legal trouble. Patricia also suggested Michelle file an official complaint with the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Health and Human Services, the group that enforces HIPAA rules. The complaint would explain how Officer Matthews tried to force her to share protected health information without permission, creating an important federal record of the event. And she suggested Michelle file a report with the State Board of Pharmacy, not complaining about herself, but simply documenting an incident where law enforcement tried to pressure a pharmacist to break her professional rules. All these steps would create many layers of official papers and protection, so Michelle and the pharmacy would be safe from any revenge attempts. Patricia's letter to the police chief was sent 2 days later. It was an 8-page letter written politely but very firmly. It explained HIPAA rules clearly, quoted exact laws and regulations, described everything Matthews did, including demanding records without papers, trying to enter the secure area without permission, trying to stop legal recording, and making threats of revenge. The letter pointed out that Matthews said his supervisor had confirmed he had the authority to demand records, which meant the problem was bigger than just one officer. It was probably poor training across the whole department. The letter asked the police department to give full training to every officer about HIPAA rules and the correct way to ask for medical records.
Michelle and Patricia decided the weak response meant they needed to take stronger action. They filed a federal lawsuit under a law called Section 1983 for violating Michelle's Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable searches and seizures of private information, plus violations of state privacy laws. The lawsuit named Officer Matthews personally and the police department. It listed very clear and detailed claims. Matthews tried to get protected health information without proper legal permission. He threatened Michelle with arrest for following her legal duty under HIPAA. He tried to enter a secure area with controlled drugs and confidential records without a warrant. He tried to stop Michelle from using her First Amendment right to record in public. And he threatened revenge by saying he would investigate her work extra hard. The lawsuit also claimed the department had a bad habit and failed to train officers properly. Their weak reply to the letter proved they had a system-wide problem of not teaching officers about HIPAA and the constitutional limits on getting medical records. Patricia showed that the department did about 20 drug diversion investigations every year, but had no written training program on how to legally get medical records. Officers seemed to believe they could just walk in and demand records from pharmacies and doctors without following proper steps. And the chief's defensive letter showed they did not take these legal issues seriously. The lawsuit asked for $500,000 in money damages, but even more important, it asked for a court statement saying Matthews' actions were wrong under the Constitution, and for a court order forcing the department to create complete training on HIPAA and medical privacy for all officers. Patricia wrote the lawsuit to be both a legal fight and an educational document. It included a 15-page extra section explaining HIPAA rules, the correct steps police must follow to get medical records, and why these protections exist to keep patient trust strong and protect the doctor-patient relationship. The story became public very quickly after the lawsuit was filed. A local news reporter who watched court filings saw the case and knew it was important. A pharmacist with a Harvard law degree defending patient privacy against a police officer who demanded records without a warrant, all caught on video. The reporter asked Michelle for an interview. Michelle talked to Patricia, who said it could be good to share the story publicly so other health workers would learn their rights. Michelle agreed to do a short interview, talking only about the law and not about the details of the ongoing court case. The interview aired on the evening news. Michelle looked professional and calm. She explained HIPAA in simple words. Healthcare workers have a legal duty to keep patient information private. That duty does not disappear just because a police officer asks for it. There are correct legal ways for police to get medical records when they really need them, and those ways balance real police needs with basic privacy rights. She said she offered to help completely as soon as proper papers were shown, but the officer refused to follow the rules and instead tried to scare her, threaten her, and force her. The news showed parts of the video with Matthews demanding records and Michelle calmly explaining HIPAA.
People reacted very strongly and mostly supported Michelle. Healthcare workers from all over the state shared their own stories of police asking for records or information without proper papers. 3 other pharmacists from the same police department contacted Patricia's office. They said officers had demanded prescription records without warrants before, and they gave the records because they were scared or didn't know their rights. A doctor told about being threatened with obstruction charges when he refused to give patient records without a subpoena. The State Pharmacy Association made a public statement praising Michelle for standing up for patient privacy and professional rules. They said they would create training materials to help all pharmacists understand their rights and duties when police ask for information. The police department tried to settle the case quickly. Their lawyers knew they had a very difficult case: an officer caught on video demanding protected records without a warrant, a pharmacist who knew HIPAA better than most lawyers because of her Harvard law degree, clear video of threats and attempts to intimidate, 3 more people with similar stories showing it wasn't just one officer, and huge public support for a health worker protecting privacy. Their first offer was $125,000 plus a promise to give some training. Patricia said no, it was too low and didn't fix the serious problems or the bigger training failure. Talks continued for months. The city raised the offer to $250,000. Patricia asked for $400,000 plus real and detailed changes to police rules. During this time, important question and answer sessions happened under oath. Matthews had to answer questions about his HIPAA training. He admitted it was very little. He said he had asked for medical records without warrants dozens of times during his career. He said his supervisors always approved those requests. When asked if he understood HIPAA was a federal law with strict rules, he said he vaguely knew there were privacy rules, but thought police had exceptions. His answers showed he really did not understand the legal limits on his power. Matthews' supervisor, Sergeant Bradley Connor, was also questioned. He admitted he told Matthews he had authority to ask for records, but when asked for the exact law that allowed it, he couldn't name one. He said it was just normal department practice for officers to ask health providers directly when they needed records for investigations. When asked about department training on HIPAA, he said it was mentioned briefly years ago in basic training, but there was no regular training after that. When asked how often officers got warrants or subpoenas for medical records, he guessed less than 10% of cases because the process took too long. The police chief, Chief Martin Walsh, was also questioned. His answers hurt the department's case a lot. When asked if there was any written department policy about getting medical records, he said no. When asked about training, he said officers were told to use reasonable judgment. When shown that many officers believed they could demand records without warrants, he said that was a misunderstanding of training, but when asked what specific training covered HIPAA, he could not name any. Patricia used those answers to prove the problem wasn't only Matthews, it was a big failure by the whole department that put the city at risk of more lawsuits in the future.
The final agreement was reached 14 months after the first incident. The city agreed to pay Michelle $375,000. Matthews had to pay $25,000 personally, taken from his paycheck, even though he had already left the department during the case and moved to a smaller police job in another state. But the money was only part of it. The real victory was the big changes to police rules. The department had to create and follow a complete new system for asking for medical records. Officers must get a warrant or subpoena except in true documented emergencies where someone is in immediate danger. Every single officer had to complete 40 hours of training on HIPAA, medical privacy, and the correct legal steps to get records. The training had to be done by outside experts who really understood health law. The agreement also created a special new job, a liaison person who worked between the police department and healthcare workers. This person had experience in both police work and health law. They would help officers know the right way to get records and help doctors, pharmacists, and nurses understand requests from police. They would keep a record of every request for medical records, check if it followed the law, and send reports every 3 months to the police chief and the city council. This new system made sure future requests would be done correctly and created openness that didn't exist before. Michelle took the money she received after paying lawyer fees and used it to start a special fund for teaching patient privacy. The fund gives free training to healthcare workers all over the state about their rights and duties when police ask for information. It made easy-to-understand training materials, online classes, and a special phone hotline that health workers could call right away when police asked for records. In the first year alone, the hotline received more than 200 calls from pharmacists, doctors, nurses, and other health workers facing the same kinds of pressure. Many of them were able to stand strong and say no correctly because the fund gave them the knowledge and confidence they needed. The court case, Michelle Carter versus Officer Matthews and the police department, became very famous in health law classes, police training, and pharmacy schools. Law schools used it to teach about HIPAA and medical privacy. Police academies used it as an example of why officers must understand the real limits of their power. Pharmacy programs used it to teach students that protecting patient privacy is a serious professional duty, even when government officials push hard. Healthcare groups used the case when writing official guides on how to respond to police requests. Privacy rights organizations used it to show why strong laws and well-educated health workers are needed to keep medical secrets safe. Officer Matthews completely left police work within 2 years of the incident. His new department became less friendly after the story spread through police circles about him trying to force private medical records without a warrant. He ended up working in private company security. 20% of every paycheck was taken for the rest of his working life to pay what he owed Michelle.
Some people felt sorry for him and said he was just trying to do his investigation job. Others said following the correct legal rules is not optional, especially when those rules exist to protect very important rights. Sergeant Connor, the supervisor who wrongly told Matthews he had authority, was demoted back to regular patrol officer and had to do a lot more training. He stayed with the department but was never promoted again. Chief Walsh received heavy criticism from the city council for allowing the department to work without proper policies or training on HIPAA. He carried out all the changes required by the agreement, but he announced his retirement 1 year later, saying he wanted more family time, though many believed he was pushed to leave. The new chief who took over made following medical privacy rules and constitutional training a top priority. The training program created because of the agreement became a model that many other police departments in the state started using. Later, it even helped shape statewide training standards. The training covered not only HIPAA, but also bigger constitutional ideas about when police can and cannot get private information without warrants. It included real-life practice situations where officers learned how to get proper warrants, how to tell real emergencies from normal cases, and how to act correctly when health workers explained their privacy duties. The training is checked and updated every year based on new court decisions and better ways of doing things. The State Pharmacy Association used Michelle's case to start a bigger campaign to protect patient privacy. They worked with lawmakers to make state laws clearer, so pharmacists would have strong protection against revenge if they refused to give private information without proper papers. They created training for every licensed pharmacist in the state, and they set up a special legal help fund so pharmacists facing court cases or threats from police for protecting privacy could get free or low-cost help. These changes made every healthcare worker in the state stronger when saying no to wrong requests. Years later, when people asked Michelle about the case, she always said the same things. She was lucky to have law school knowledge that gave her the confidence and facts to stand strong. Many other healthcare workers face the same pressure, but don't have that extra knowledge to help them. Protecting patient privacy is not something that blocks good police work. It is an essential protection of basic human rights. When police follow the correct steps and get warrants or subpoenas, healthcare workers help fully and quickly. The problem happens only when officers try to skip the rules by using fear and threats. Michelle still works as a pharmacist at Riverside Pharmacy. Now she is often asked for advice by other pharmacists facing police requests. She speaks at big pharmacy meetings, police training classes, and community events about patient privacy. She always ends her talks with the same message. Medical privacy is not a fancy extra or annoying paperwork. It is a fundamental right that lets people get health care without being afraid their private information will be shared without their knowledge or permission.
If you enjoy the video, please subscribe. When that privacy is protected by brave health workers who stand up against wrong pressure, it helps every single patient in the whole system, even the ones who will never know her name. The video of the confrontation is still online and used in thousands of training programs. It shows in real life what HIPAA and medical privacy really mean. A police officer demanding records without legal permission. A pharmacist calmly explaining the law and refusing to give in to fear. A retired law professor agreeing the pharmacist was right. And finally, the victory of following the law over someone who thought their badge gave them power to ignore federal rules. The $400,000 total agreement and the big rule changes sent a strong message. Police cannot simply demand medical records just because an investigation is hard or takes time. They must follow proper legal steps. Healthcare workers who stand up for patient privacy are protecting not only one person's rights, but the trust in the entire healthcare system. And when officers are not properly trained about the limits of their power, the responsibility falls on both the officer and the department that failed to teach them. Michelle's case proved that knowledge is real power, that learning matters, and that sometimes a pharmacist with a Harvard Law degree is exactly the right person in exactly the right place to defend rights that help millions of patients who will never even hear her name.